I have the microphone and the webcam on, but I haven't actually switched on the webinar. Gosh, you people, thank you for your patience and thank you for actually getting through here. I have all these texts that have come in here saying, is there a problem? Has webinar begun? And, and so forth. Okay, sorry. Gosh, there's a whole slew of them. It's 15 minutes that I've been doing this. Someone says, this guy. All right. Okay. Apologies, people. Okay. Well. Okay. Good thing I hadn't switched off my phone. Well, in summary, what we were just going over here, and I'm just going to read the Khenpo's text, and all of you online, I know you're all very advanced students of Svatantrika Madhyamaka, so you're comfortable with this. It just says, although some Svatantrikas teach the two truths as quite separate and different in nature, others stress that they are inseparable, both being different aspects of a single reality. The former are stressing that emptiness means absolute non-existence and that all that we experience as existing is relative truth. Okay, so that is something that we universally do across the Mahayana, which is apply analysis, and that's where we apply what's called Döndam Chuchikirikpa, which is absolute analysis. Anything that we subject to analysis necessarily doesn't hold up. We can keep dividing it further and further down. The foundation for the label we found ultimately is non-existent. And that then is where we speak about this absolute non-existence. And this is universal all across the board, in whether you're talking about the foundational aspects of Buddhism and the understanding of Pratitya Samutprada, or whether you're talking about Dzogchen. Every practitioner establishes this understanding of the non-existence of phenomena in the absolute sense. Now, then the Khenpo says the latter, they're stressing that even though it is true, meaning everything ultimately is emptiness, emptiness and appearance cannot ultimately be two separate entities. And that's an important point, obviously, and this will also have reflected in the Heart Sutra, where we say form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So here it says, ultimately, the true nature of things cannot be conceptualized as either existent, non-existent, both or neither. So at the end of the day, the labels that we're using, they really only function as we're studying the teaching. They're very helpful when we, as persons who are engaged in a culture that analyzes, that's discursive, when we individually think, we form opinions, we cannot deny that we have views. And so that's where it's taking that into account. Then there are the teachings that actually discuss our reality and encourage us to analyze. But ultimately, of course, what we're aiming towards is really to settle the mind into freedom from constructs. But we have to be intimately aware of how these constructs, they are a reality for us. Otherwise, we're just going to sit there with the thought, no constructs. and that's where it becomes sort of just another, where we end up actually falling into a category which we call the dumb meditator. In the Buddhist teaching, we talk about two extremes that can occur. You have the dumb meditator and the crazy intellectual. And of course, the crazy intellectual is this person that's just sort of all wired on ideas and has so many ideas and has so much to say and so many opinions and so forth, and in which also the Buddhist teaching becomes just another, you could say, extension of that, and where the study then is endless. And that's where we are generally warned against just getting too involved in studies. Also, you need to have an initial insight, but then at one point you need to just practice. So that's where the crazy intellectual, that's sort of where you essentially always are just essentially like drinking salt water. You always want more and more and more information. The other one, the dumb meditator, essentially just then not really understanding anything and just sort of sitting and just, not just really not actually applying any kind of prajna, but really just sitting with the ordinary mind and nothing changes. And that's where we would say that's where it could be a bit counterproductive if someone who hasn't really developed prajna, and you can say having all the conditions for the path, receive teachings on Mahamudra or Dzogchen and so forth, and then just says, okay, well, I'm just going to meditate on non-thought. And that's where an entire lifetime can be wasted. So these two extremes we'd want to avoid. So of course, the ultimate true nature is not something in which we then sit and we have particular opinions. It's simply just the discerning that doesn't fall into these conceptual extremes as thinking that things exist or that they're non-existent, both or neither. Again, this is vastly different from what we've grown up with, so it's absolutely impossible really to approach Buddhist meditation without an understanding of what we're talking about here. But that said, then of course the practice itself then has to have the prajna, in which we don't succumb or naively are pulled into these conceptual extremes. So it says, such a view is very close to the prasangika view. So of course the prasangikas and the svatantrikas, they agree, and ultimately we settle the mind free from conceptual constructs. But like I was mentioning before, to those who could hear, is that the svatantrikas, they will actually they'll state things like praticca samutpada. They'll actually speak about understanding both relative and absolute truth in terms of explaining, whereas the prasangikas, they don't really do much explaining except they just refute any conceptual position. They'll just expose the flaw of particular logics, but they won't offer any kind of, you could say, handle on things. And that's you could say, the beauty of the prasangika is that they offer there's nowhere to have a handle, and as such also there's nowhere to construct any dogma. So in that sense, the prasangika view is generally viewed as the highest of all views. There is, however, a danger. This is also well known, that it could fall into nihilism, that you then think, well, the prasangikas, they're not saying anything. Obviously, that means that there's nothing whatsoever. And that's not the case either. Prasangikas have their own particular take on relative truth, which is where they simply just agree with the world. So if somebody subscribes to a particular view, then the prasangikas just say, sure, in the relative truth, sure. But as soon as it comes to absolute truth, they have no position whatsoever. And that is, you could say, a very smooth approach. Like I was also saying before, however, for us who are situated within a community where we supposedly are in conversation with others and where we hear opinions and so on, it's quite helpful. The Svatantrika view of explaining the two truths is very helpful for us who live in, you could say, a multi-discursive or multicultural context where there are so many different views. And that's where it's very helpful to have some handle on how we understand both relative and absolute truth. Okay. Someone says the silence was kind of nice. I agree. I apologize now for this onslaught of sound pollution. Anyway, so as far as these various, you say what we call tenets go, then they have various ways of investigating reality. And again, this is where we then arrive at the view. And the view is then where we have some, you say, some professionalism. We know what we're doing when we're meditating. And this is very helpful. So the method of investigation here, it says Svatantrikas use many detailed arguments for establishing their position. The object is to establish the emptiness of all elements of existence And the method is systematically to examine each element of existence in turn until one reaches the conviction that all without exception are empty. So let's say, for example, if I look at this watch and then I identify this is in fact just, I label this watch, but as far as an ant goes, as far as a kookaburra goes, as far as a bear goes or whatever, we would label this differently. From the point of view of this itself, there's not anywhere in there where this is a watch, where there's identified something that is intrinsically watch. This is just a label that we give to this. And as such, when we understand that, we also understand that applies to other things, not just watches. And it also applies to, this is very important, particularly for the modern person who, it's just incredible how we develop opinions about people that we don't know. You know, we develop opinions about politicians that we have never ever met. And yet everybody has an incredibly clear opinion about so-and-so is a complete and utter, you know, fool. And that was a nice politician there. And we actually don't know these people. The thing is, what is actually happening is we're labeling on the basis of particular information that we receive, particular images. Then we see the face of a particular politician, and we feel happy or we feel dislike or whatever. And all of that has nothing to do with the person itself. Moreover, and this is of course something we've looked at many times, one person can be a child, can be a parent, can be a niece, can be a daughter, etc., etc. From the point of view of the object itself, there is no inherent existence. Everything exists in terms of the labels that we construct from our relative position. And when we begin to understand that, both in terms of, you can say, absolute analysis, that there's nothing there, but also an understanding that other people see things differently. If we had that, there would not be any fighting between labor and liberals. There wouldn't be fighting between Republicans and Democrats. There wouldn't be fights between, you know, this fundamentalist position and the opposing fundamentalist position, because there would be an understanding how the other party actually sees things, and this would be the end of wars. So this is, you could say, really the foundation for the non-aggression that is basic to the Buddhist teaching. When we say non-violence, it's not just that we're saying, well, it's nice to, you know, not kill people, but on the other hand, it actually doesn't just come from being nice, but it actually is from deeply understanding that the object doesn't really possess the truth that we are projecting onto it. So this is where this analysis is very helpful. So we proceed with that, like the Khenpo says, until one reaches the conviction that all without exception are empty. In the Prajnaparamita Sutras, the Buddha lists 108 emptinesses, starting with the 18 elements and including all phenomena up to the 10 powers and the omniscient wisdom of the Buddha. And that means that we don't find anything that's truly existent, even within the qualities of enlightenment. So it's not just that the dharmas of confusion and samsara, they're empty, but also the phenomena of enlightenment are also such that they cannot be objectively grasped. So this is, so then Khenpo says, in Buddhist philosophy, the elements of existence are classified in different ways. Each system purports to cover all possible elements of existence or experience. The idea is to have a kind of checklist of all possible phenomena and then to examine them all to find their ultimate true nature that is common to them all. So there's various ways of approaching this, but the bottom line is that we find this, understand the true nature of emptiness is basic to all phenomena. So early on, the Khenpo says here, we have already seen how the 5 skandhas are used in this way. So on the basis of analyzing, we can see that form, feeling, perception, impulse, and consciousness, the 5 skandhas, they're all empty of nature. And this, of course, also is what we have in the Heart Sutra. And then he says, now we are going to use the 18 elements as another example of this method. And this, again, is what we covered in the Abhidharma study. So the 18 elements are I, form, eye consciousness. So that's where we have these three, what was it, channels, right? Yeah, three channels. So there's the object, there's the form which is out there, then there's the faculty, the eye, and on the basis of that, there's something out there, there's an eye, there's a well-functioning faculty, and then that generates eye consciousness. There's sort of the perception, white wall or whatever it might be. So similarly also we have ear, sound, ear consciousness. And then we have nose, smell, nose consciousness. Tongue, taste, tongue consciousness. Body, tactile sensation, body consciousness. Mind, mental objects, mind consciousness. So this is where we can see how the six consciousnesses, they're all generated in conjunction with six objects on the basis of six faculties. So the Khenpo says, in this list, the six sense organs, eye, etc., refer to the actual sensitive part of each organ that links the physical or mental object to the consciousness. Eye consciousness cannot arise simply in the presence of form. The light sensitive organ has also to be present and functioning, meaning our eye. The mind organ is the moment of consciousness that bears the image of a sense consciousness or a mental object and enables a conceptual consciousness to grasp it. So there might be some object that arises in the mind. Yeah, we can just think of, well, we just talked about politicians. Try and conjure up a particular politician in your mind. And that's that image there, which is entirely mental, that will again prompt a particular conceptual consciousness. So then the Khenpo says, Nagarjuna was the great founder of the Madhyamaka system. In his Mula Madhyama Karika, he sums up his system of reason. So as far as Nagarjuna goes, then this is sort of the great work of Madhyamaka. It's Nagarjuna, and it's translated as the, what is it again, the root verses of the middle way. And there's various translations of this. His disciple, and his disciple actually means his follower, because Buddhapalita lived a few hundred years after Nagarjuna. But anyway, his follower, Buddhapalita, wrote a famous commentary on this, but his contemporary, Bhavaviveka, criticized his method and established a system of his own, again based on the Mula Madhyama Karika. So this is a few hundred years after Nagarjuna, right? Then you have this commentary that is written by Buddhapalita, which is very much taking this view that there's nothing actually that we can ultimately that we can establish ultimately. Now you have at the same time you have Bhaviveka, who was more involved with, you could say, dialogue with the contemporary culture of India, and he, as much as he was equally a follower of Madhyamaka, he also developed ways in which the understanding of Madhyamaka could be articulated. And so he actually made what you could call assertions. And then what happened was then, and in there he criticized Buddhapalita not really making sufficient assertions. And we can argue possibly his motivation was because he thought it would be necessary in order to engage others to sort of meet people with their language. The approach of Buddhapalita and the Prasangika in general is very forbidding because it's so hard-hitting in its logic. And so there's a softer approach really from the likes of Bhaviveka in terms of actually establishing language and ways of asserting this understanding. So as far as Bhaviveka goes, then he then became founder of what we call Svatantrika Madhyamaka. Okay. Here it needs to be said, this is entirely a Tibetan classification. In India, they actually didn't talk about Svatantrika and Prasangika. It's later when these systems were brought to Tibet, and there was, you say the Tibetans were very keen custodians of everything Indian. So they had this enormous veneration for the Indian systems of explanation centuries after it had disappeared from India. And so the Tibetans actually identified how there was two different, you could say, discourses present within these two styles of presentation. So Buddhapalita, he's associated with the Prasangika, and the Bhavivika, he's associated with the Svatantrika. And particularly then Buddhapalita's follower Chandrakirti, he's renowned for really as the founder of the Prasangika. So it says here, Chandrakirti, a follower of Buddhapalita, wrote a treatise defending Buddhapalita and arguing against Bhavivika's critique of his work. In this way, he became the founder of the Prasangika Madhyamika. In some way, the issue again here is very much about arriving at an ultimate ontological perspective. But then again, I think nowadays, many scholars who are studying these topics, they will say, well, it's really more that one is talking more about the phenomenological aspect and one is talking more about the ontological. And the presentation of Bhavivika and likewise also Shantarakshita was very much about, you could say, establishing common ground for discussion. Anyway, then the Khenpo says, so what kind of reasoning did Nagarjuna use to establish the emptiness of all dharmas? I'd like to say that Nagarjuna's, the Mula Madhyamika Karika, is dense. There's a few commentaries, there's commentaries around, but these are incredibly dense arguments. And so you'll be happy to hear that Khenpo says here, what kind of reasoning did Nagarjuna use to establish the emptiness of all dharmas? I'm not going to go into them all here. You can be relieved. In fact, for the meditator, it's not really necessary to know them all. One just has to know enough to be able to establish the emptiness of all dharmas for oneself as a preparation for the meditation. And that's where it's very helpful, just like when you come across, for example, Elizabeth Matis Namgyal that explains emptiness and praticca samutpada, just in terms of the example where she says, you know, if you're referring to Jamgön Kongtrul Lodrötaye's teachings, is this one or two, you know? And that way we say, well, it's one shape, but it's not one either because there's two fingers, so it's neither one nor two. That's where we understand that our labels, they actually don't really correspond to the way things actually exist. And that's why we humbly need to acknowledge that the mind that labels and solidifies is essentially mistaken. And that's why if we analyze, we can see our labels are really just our own projections. So if we could get that, that's already good enough for us then sitting down and allowing the concepts that we ordinarily hold on to so dearly to just let them be and not necessarily perpetuate them. So then Khenpo says one of the most powerful arguments Nagarjuna used was the argument against the phenomenon being either single or multiple. Taking each element in turn, he asked if it could be said to exist as a single entity or an entity made up of parts. It is taken as axiomatic that anything that exists must be either single or multiple, since no other possibility exists, right? So, do I have a hand here? I guess I do, right? How many hands is there? There's a hand. Well, that's definitely true. And so I'm very grateful that I have this hand. But then if we subject it to analysis, and that's where the Khenpo then says, take, for example, a form such as a hand. If it was single, it could not be divided. All right, so we would say, there is the hand. But, you know, if it's single, it could not be divided. Since it can be divided, it must be multiple. Well, actually, it's not, neither is it single, nor is it multiple, actually. So that's where he says, once you have divided the hand into its part, where is the hand? One does not find a hand as such. So the hand cannot exist. It is neither single nor multiple. So of course, these are labels that are very helpful. Similarly with the watch, similar with any phenomenon. And I would say it's not really enough to just say, oh, wow, that was far out. I don't really understand it, but I guess that's Madhyamika. And yeah, I don't know. It's actually, take it very literally. We could do that. The phenomena that we attribute as solidly existing as one, does it really exist? Because we are labeling it as that. And that's where we begin to see there's a difference between how things exist relatively in terms of our perception and how they actually truly are. And that's where we can also apply this to all the things that we label good, bad, and that we actually react to. So that's where we begin to become a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more clear on the nature of our experience. So Khenpo says, one does not find a hand as such, so the hand cannot exist. It is neither single nor multiple. Hand is not nothing in itself. Hand is nothing in itself. It has no self-nature. It is simply a concept. You may think to yourself that although it is true that there is no hand as such, there are the atoms that make up the hand. However, an atom has to be either single or multiple. If it were single, it could not have dimensions. To have dimensions means it has left and a right side, etc. One can find all the parts, but then where is the atom itself? So as one keeps going down and essentially finds that there is no absolute bottom building block, then the implication is that since there's nothing that we actually can that is ultimately there, then the idea of something actually existing on the basis of something that's not there to begin with, there's nothing that we can actually find. So for something to actually exist as singular, then it would have to just be singular. We can see it's not. For it to be multiple, then it would mean that it was actually composed of many different parts. But if each of these parts, they themselves actually are infinitely divided, there's not even the necessary ingredients there. The parts are not even there. So that's where we find out that things don't exist neither as singular nor as multiple. So the Khenpo says, however minutely one analyzes, one can never arrive at the smallest possible existent particle of which all other existent things could be said to be made up. This is applying logic. And of course, we can say something about the difference between empirical, you could say application and logic. But at the end of the day, the only thing we're actually interested in is identifying the way in which we mistakenly label and solidify our perceptions. So that's the real object there. And as far as the various schools go, then some will assert that there's actual external phenomena. Some will say it's entirely mind. But at the end of the day, it's really about working with the mind that reacts to these what essentially are projections onto what we then can find. In fact, the ground for our projections is non-existent. So Khenpo says Nagarjuna used reasoning to establish this. Modern day scientists are coming up to the same conclusion using experiments. Maybe we find the experimental evidence more convincing than Nagarjuna's reasoning. It does not really matter which method one uses if the conclusion is the same. So that's where we can universally sort of identify how it is that the way in which we attribute solidity, it is essentially founded on labeling phenomena that are essentially dependent arising. Praticca Samutpada. Okay. Someone was the emptiness of webinar. Well, that's actually an extreme. There was, you could say, in that there was no webinar, we would say that's the where you could say webinar is beyond, you could say, coming in ultimately beyond, you could say, appearance and non-appearance. And yet relatively, there was definitely an absence. Yeah. I don't quite understand how simply having a deep understanding of how others arrive at their imputation would make for peace. I may fully understand how someone arrived at a decision to drop a bomb, but that does not mean I agree with his decision. Oh, we're not talking about agreeing, because if somebody is sitting there with a bomb and they're going to fire it, we should by all means stop them. But the thing is, we could probably understand that this person, this person was brought up in a particular environment, was drilled into believing that the world order and the systems and so forth. So we can understand the person. So in that way, that understanding will actually enable us probably to be more skillful in handling the situation with the person who's just about to, commit a crime or whatever. So it's not about going on tagging along, but it's just about understanding the person. And when there is this sympathy, then there's much more ability to work with them, All these different philosophical and experiential systems came into understanding over centuries. What should we understand now? Should we work through this and experience them all ourselves? Yeah. It's really just in some way, like I'm trying to sort of make a point about here, it really all comes down to just understanding dependent arising, praticca samutpada. And that's universal all across the Buddhist teachings. But it has some interesting aspects, and the more we understand this, we can also understand how people they have particular views. But just like I was also started off saying, it's just helpful to know what the different Buddhist traditions what they think and how they basically approach the path, and it enables us to appreciate all these different paths, and they all have their particular role. The Prasangika have their particular role, the Svatantrika have their role, the Sautrantika, the Vaibhashika, and so forth, the different Shravaka schools, they all have their role. And so it's quite helpful, and also for us to essentially practice our, you could say, familiarity with getting out of you could say the particular discourse that we're so brought up with, that sort of sees the world very much according to a materialist scientific tradition, to begin to actually break through this. Any of these modes of analysis helps us actually to provides this greater perspective, this understanding of emptiness or vipassana, whatever we choose to call it. I find insubstantiality easier to understand than emptiness and nihilism. Is this a problematic position? Well, look, we're a work in progress. So initially we might sort of feel something is easier to understand, and we have to we build on that. So that's why we return to the text again and again and sort of expand our understanding. But emptiness never means that there's nothing there. Emptiness just means that nature of reality is that we cannot grasp it. So if your understanding of insubstantiality tells you that's good enough. That's, for the time being, that's a place marker for emptiness. And that's the foundation for then the view in terms of us approaching the topic of the practice of vipassana. So any time that we, even just meditating on impermanence, we're less prone to naively attach ourselves to what is impermanent. We're less prone to attach ourselves when we understand that it's in fact just a insubstantial label that we are projecting onto a phenomenon, and as such, the phenomenon itself doesn't exist in that solid way. All of that initially sounds theoretical, but it becomes the foundation for the confidence in us leaving the mind when we are practicing meditation. And that's where the sage is someone who emerges with wisdom, not just with sort of being a vegetable, because of actually training that clarity of mind that's not caught up in the kleshas, caught up in the toxic mind that has likes and dislikes, attachment and aversion, pride, jealousy, and so on. So that's where the clarity of mind that sees through the appearances provides discerning. So that's why it's important when we're meditating, we don't end up as the down meditator or just as a vegetable, but actually that meditation provides a vehicle for increasing the discerning. And that is ultimately, this prajna is what cuts through the web of confusion and samsara. So I get a bit frustrated by the metaphor of a reel of film for describing mental phenomena. if someone has never seen a reel or film, they would not be able to understand the parallels. So it's not really a universal way of describing the experience of mind. That's right. No, this is addresses just to people who are familiar with the concept of real film. All these different explanations, they're just trying to, in Tibet, they didn't have it either. So it's really just trying to reach out and establish an understanding. So it's really just coming from a place of compassion to the audience and so on. So is it possible that we only assert certain assumptions about our experience based on things we have seen or understood? Well, yes, that's exactly, you could say, the cause of samsara. If I hear a story about mental phenomena being like a reel of film and take that to be true, I will start to construct my experience in such a way to verify and rarefy that for myself, confirmation bias. Yeah, well, it's really just intended for us to not be deceived by appearances. When we, for example, see a firebrand, we think there's an actual wheel of, or a circle or a ring of fire. And so that's where we mistakenly attribute a solidity, what in fact is just an appearance on the basis of special causes and conditions. So all these various examples, they're just given to us in order to free us from a mistaken perception. So it's, again, comes back to the only thing the Buddha wants is for us to apply prajna to gain the experience of vipassana. And vipassana here, we're not talking about a meditation technique, but we're talking about vipassana in the sense of no longer being bound by delusion, this wider perspective, seeing clearly. So this is what we're really, that's really what we're trying to do. Yeah. Okay, incense stick might explain it better. Thank you. All right, good.
So Jakob, can I ask another
Yeah.
question? So the whole business between open awareness, could that be thought of as prajnaparamita itself? Is there a separate quality of cultivated prajnaparamita that's distinct from the underlying wisdom of just dropping into?
Yeah, if we could say open awareness is prajnaparamita.
So in that case,
But for it to be prajna means that we're not deceived. So there could be an open awareness that's not necessarily discerning.
right, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
so if you use the conceptual mind to sort of take away the fascination with the world of form, and you start to sort of lose the sense of fascination. And
Peter, you're gonna have to. We're gonna have to do what people are always asking us, which is actually okay. Here's the question.
So my question is, just to understand, you're using the conceptual mind to sort of dismember the sort of fascination with the world of form.
Yes.
And then once that's achieved, then you can confidently start out with your meditation journey. When you drop in that place of open abiding, that's where the prajnaparamita emerges. And so I want to be careful about, is there a trap if you lean too heavily onto exercising conceptual mind, dismember the world of form, it might interfere with the availability of the prajnaparamita arising. And
yeah, that's a well-known discussion where some would say you always need to have this analytical mind that keeps going on. And some traditions, they would say, as long as you have that analytical mind, you're never really settling. You're just, what you're continually generating are what we call generic images.
Mm-hmm.
So it still constitutes a cognitive obscuration. There's still reference.
It feels like a concern, like there's ruts carved into the mind where you exercise the mind in navigating in the world of form, and there's a way where it's almost like a reification of that process that could interfere with the sort of open, spacious knowing of prajna.
Yeah.
Is that a?
Yes, and so like I say, it's a very known phenomenon. That's
Okay.
why basically when it comes to Vipassana, we distinguish between two kinds of Vipassana. One is analytical meditation, where there's continually this analytical, that you could say, muscle that dismantles and deconstructs. And the other one is settling meditation, which is settling into that which is not deluded. But that's why it's always tricky, because we would always, the discerning, there's a bit of caution around this, settling into this nature of mind. It could very well be just a dull state of mind.
The stupid shamatha that they
exactly.
talk about, yeah.
So that's where, particularly in the Dzogchen and Mahavira traditions, where there is a lot of emphasis on settling meditation, there's also really the emphasis that this should really be guided by a teacher, and that there is this quality that of discerning that is genuinely taking place. So that's the tricky part.
Okay, right, fair enough. Okay. Was it in one's own meditation, is it helpful just to attend to a very alert, very aware state of mind that then supports a clarity to emerge? Or
yeah, and that's generally how we understand shamatha and vipassana. So that's almost from the word go,
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Where the so-called Vajrayana begins and the Mantra teachings and Dzogchen and Mahavira begins, is that within that clarity, then there could be an identification or a knowledge of the actual undeceived, undiluted condition of mind. And so that's where there is the sense that you could, someone with the right, you could say, circumstances, could actually settle into the nature of mind, just settle on that. But we generally would say, this is where I have to actually sort of being honest to my own lineage, and as was taught to myself, is we would say it would be a big mistake. They actually say it would be foolish to attempt understanding and meditating on the co-emergent wisdom without purification, accumulation of merit, and the blessing of an authentic teacher. So this you will hear all the time in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, particularly in the Nyingma Nakatu, Dzogchen Mahavira traditions. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen. But
those are all very supportive. Yeah.
These are supportive because they're aspects that are required.
Okay, thanks.
Gosh, my conscience is clear today. Otherwise, I'm sitting here sort of trying to repeat the question. So did that work? I hope everybody could you all hear the question loud and clear? I think we're going to have to do it like this in the future. Everyone's welcome to ask questions. We have to come up here. Yeah. Yes, it was awesome. Okay. Much better. Good. Much easier for me. All right. Okay. Well, we're kind of towards the end of the time, so let's just leave it here. But again, please don't think of this as, you can say, some excruciating exercise in very cerebral philosophy. There's a very rich tradition, obviously over 1,000 years or 2,000 years of presenting meditation, and it's very valuable to have some handle on it, so that meditation really reaches its you could say its ultimate purpose, which is really dismantling the cause of suffering. And suffering comes from confusion. So we have to look at a little bit, you'd say, the universal factors of confusion and how we generate confusion. So that's where we need to look into these topics, Abhidharma, Praticca Samuppada, and so on. But you will find them very helpful in terms of having some, you say, clarity about what we're doing on the path. Okay. Somebody says, but couldn't hear your answers probably. Okay, this is actually because it's a cardioid mic, then you have to actually turn it around to the speaker. Yeah. Okay, we'll get that next time. A current great example of the suffering that arises from people imputing different views of the one word freedom. Aha, yes. What is it? The Canadian truckers. They have one idea, and the business people have another idea. Yes. Some are seeing it as a choice to carry a weapon, some as the choice to vilify others, and some as at the choice to be wealthy at others' expense. Absolutely. But we're always, whenever we are in this situation with conflict and different views, it's always so helpful when we can understand the other party. So it's never about this, and that is where we can say, yes, the word freedom clearly doesn't have inherent existence. So this, what you're presenting here, sort of underscores the emptiness of language. So there you go. Yeah, thank you. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be free. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish evermore and more. Okay, we'll just take a few minutes break, and then we'll begin the practice component. plugged in, yeah. Yes, it usually back. Working now. Can hear you now. All right, guys. Well, there seems to have been a particular issue with the gods of technology today. So. Anyway, hey, for so many of you, you know this anyway. So I've just been talking about what you're perfectly familiar with. Peter, do you think you could move the Michela's table, because it always sits in the middle of the place we're walking? Yeah. Someone says the silence was lovely. Okay. So in the Samadhi-Raj Sutra, it says, those who while walking, sitting, standing, or sleeping recollect the moonlight Buddha will always be in the Buddha's presence and will attain the vast nirvana. And his pure body is the color of gold. Beautiful is the protector of the world. Whoever visualizes him like this practices the meditation of the Bodhisattvas. In keeping with this, we should practice remembering our incomparable teacher, the Lord of Sages, in the following way. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. May all sentient beings enjoy happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering in the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the sacred happiness devoid of suffering. And may they dwell in boundless equanimity that is free from attachment and aversion. Ah, as the union of unborn emptiness and the ceaseless appearances of interdependence, magically there appears before me in the sky, amidst vast clouds of offerings, on a jeweled lion throne and lotus, sun, and moon disk seats, the incomparable teacher, Lion of the Shakyas. His body the color of gold, adorned with major and minor marks, clad in the 3 Dharma robes, he sits in Vajra posture. His right hand gracefully poised in the earth-touching mudra, and his left hand in the gesture of meditation, holding an alms bowl full of nectar. Like a mountain of gold, magnificent he shines in splendor, spreading beams of wisdom light across the whole expanse of space. The 8 close suns, 16 elders and the light, a vast ocean-like retinue of noble beings encircles him all around. Simply think of him and he grants the glory of the highest bliss, liberation from samsara and nirvana, the 2 extremes. He is the great being, perfect embodiment of every source of refuge. With your great compassion, you embraced this turbulent and degenerate world and made 500 mighty aspirations. You are as exalted as the white lotus. Whoever hears your name shall never return to samsara. Most compassionate teacher, I pay homage to you. I pay homage. All my own and others' virtues of body, speech, and mind, together with all our possessions, visualized like Samantabhadra's offering clouds, I offer to you. All the harmful actions and transgressions I have committed throughout beginningless time, each and every one I now confess with intense and heartfelt regret. In all virtuous actions of the noble ones and ordinary beings, accumulated throughout the past, present, and future, I rejoice. Turn the wheel of the profound and vast Dharma teaching ceaselessly and in every direction, I pray. Your wisdom body is like space and remains changeless throughout past, present, and future. Yet in the perception of those to be guided, you go through the display of birth and death. Even so, let your form body continue always to appear. Through all the virtues have accumulated in the past and accumulating now and will accumulate in the future. For the sake of benefiting all beings who are as infinite as space, may you, the sovereign of Dharma, be forever pleased, and may all attain the state of the victorious one, the Lord of Dharma. Living beings like us, adrift in this degenerate age, have no guidance nor protection. Because of your kindness, caring for us with surpassing compassion, every manifestation in this world now of the three jewels is your enlightened activity. You are then our only refuge, incomparable, supreme. So from our hearts we pray with total confidence and faith. Do not neglect the great promises you made in times gone by, but hold us until we attain enlightenment with your compassion. Supreme Teacher Bhagavan, Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Te yatao muni muni maha munaya soha. 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 Om 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 mani mani 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 maha munaya soha. From the Buddha's body there emanates a great radiance, a multicolored rays of wisdom light, dispelling all our own and others' obscurations, and causing all the genuine qualities of the Mahayana path to rise within us, so that we attain the level of perfection from which we will never return again to samsara. The miraculous display of the unsurpassable wisdom appears as the intentions, deeds, prayers, knowledge, love, and ability of all the Sugatas and their children. May all beings become exactly like them. I prostrate to all the Buddhas and to the Bodhisattvas, endowed with the divine eye of the sages, and to the Shravakas as well. I prostrate to Bodhicitta, which counteracts birth in all lower realms, perfectly shows the path to the higher realms, and leads to no aging nor death. Whatever negative actions I have done under the influence of an afflicted mind in the presence of the Buddhas, I fully acknowledge them all. By the accumulation of any merit I have created through the three kinds of activities, may my seed of omniscience grow, and may I attain awakening that never ends. Whatever offerings to the Buddhas that can be found in realms of the 10 directions are known to the Buddhas who rejoice in them. I rejoice in all these offerings. I fully acknowledge all negative actions and rejoice in all merit. I prostrate to all the Buddhas. May I attain supreme primordial wisdom. I earnestly request the Bodhisattvas who reside on the 10 levels in all the direction of the worlds in the 10 directions to awaken into supreme enlightenment. Once you have awakened into genuine enlightenment and tamed the Maras and their hordes, may you turn the wheel of Dharma so that all living beings may be healed. With the sound of the great Dharma drum, may you free all sentient beings who are suffering. Throughout inconceivable millions of kalpas, may you remain and teach the Dharma. Mired in the swamp of desire, entangled in the strands of cyclic existence, I am fettered by all that binds. I supplicate those, supreme among humans, to look upon me. The Buddhas do not blame sentient beings who are flawed. With a loving heart for all sentient beings, may the Buddhas free them from the ocean of cyclic existence. Any perfect Buddhas who are present, those who have passed away and those yet to come, may I train following in their way and engage in enlightened conduct. Having perfected the 6 paramitas, may I liberate the 6 families of sentient beings. Having actualized the 6 extraordinary faculties, may I reach unexcelled enlightenment. Future phenomena are not born, and those past will not occur. Present phenomena have no inherent nature. There is no actual location. There is no perception. There are no outer things. May I realize the Dhammadhatu of emptiness. According to the Buddhas, the great sages, there are no truly existent sentient beings, no life force. There is no truly existent individual and no nurturing of a self. May I realize the Dhammatā where the self is not present. An entity such as grasping onto a self and mind is not present within any of the paramitas. To benefit all sentient beings, may I give with generosity, free of avarice. Since things do not exist as entities, may my wealth appear spontaneously. Since all things totally disintegrate, may I perfect the paramita of generosity. Endowed with a flawless ethics that is guided by rules and an ethics that is completely pure. With an ethics free of an arrogant mind, may I perfect the paramita of ethics. Just as the elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, bodhisattvas do not remain caught by mental constructs. By attaining patience, anger never arises. May I perfect the paramita of patience. Through the power of previous perseverance, having become stable, enthusiastic, and free of laziness, and through a strong body and mind, may I perfect the paramita of perseverance. Through the samadhi where all is illusion-like, through the samadhi of the hero's stride, and through the samadhi that is like a vajra, may I perfect the paramita of meditative concentration. Through actualizing the three gates of full liberation, the equal nature of the three times, and the three types of knowing as well, may I perfect the paramita of prajna. Through persevering in a bodhisattva's practice, may I attain the kaya praised by all the Buddhas, the luminous kaya and the kaya blazing with majesty. Thus may my intention be fulfilled. May I be like the famed Maitreya, who engaged in such a practice, perfected the paramitas, and perfectly abides at the zenith of the 10th level. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be free. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. May the Buddha appear in this world, teaching shine like the sun. May the holders of the teaching live in harmony, and thus may all be auspicious for the teaching to endure. We pray for the good health of the teachers. We pray for their precious lives to be long. We pray for their activities to spread and increase. May we be blessed never to part from the teachers. Akashasya stiti yavat yavachan jagataha stiti tavan mama stiti bhuyaha jagaduka nignata. Akashasya stiti yavat yavacha jagataha stiti tavan mama stiti bhuyaha jagaduka nignata. Tavan mama stiti bhuyaha jagaduka nignata. Tavan mama stiti bhuyaha jagaduka nignata. As long as space remains, as long as the world remains, may I too remain to alleviate the sufferings of the world. Thank you very much. One guy said, this was a great exercise in lip reading. And the same guy says, Mara is your IT guy.